There's something soul-splitting about watching someone else drag a beanbag chair into your boathouse like they own the place, especially when they're sipping boxed rose and barking orders at your golden retriever. That was the scene I walked into on a quiet Thursday evening, holding a fishing rod in one hand and a gas station sandwich in the other, blinking in disbelief as Karen from the HOA, yes, that Karen, kicked off her Crocs and sprawled across a lawn chair she had somehow managed to wedge between my kayak rack and the bait cooler. She didn't flinch when she saw me. She didn't offer a greeting. She just glanced up, took a swig from her wine carton, and said, "You weren't using it anyway." I stood frozen at the edge of the dock, wind whipping my flannel shirt, brain stalling like a cold truck engine. Max, my dog, gave me a confused look, as if to say, "Are we being robbed?" Politely. That was the exact moment I knew she had no idea what she'd just done. Not only was she trespassing, not only was she squatting on a floating, fully motorized military-grade platform that I personally built with more redundancy than a space shuttle. She thought it was just a shed with windows. Oh, I couldn't wait. I took a slow step forward, letting the wooden planks creak under my boot. Karen's only acknowledgement was a lazy wave of her hand as she gestured at a crookedly hung sign she had duct-taped to the railing. It read, HOA Social Lounge Members Only. My name wasn't on it. I cleared my throat, and she finally turned her head, letting out a sigh like I was an Uber Eats guy who got the order wrong. "Jack, it's nothing personal," she said with the glazed conviction of a woman who had clearly rehearsed this speech. The board voted to repurpose unused structures within the association boundaries. Your boathouse hasn't been touched in months, and technically it's on the lake. The lake's part of our jurisdiction. I stared at her, momentarily stunned by the density of that logic. The sheer gall of someone hijacking your property and justifying it with a rulebook they wrote themselves is almost impressive. I told her calmly that this boathouse wasn't under any HOA jurisdiction, that it's on my private parcel with separate lake rights, and that she was trespassing. She responded by lifting her phone, tapping a screen and, no joke, saying, "Then I'll have to report you for harassment." Max let out a single disgusted snort. I stood there silently for a long beat, calculating my next move. I'd spent 30 years in naval engineering, 10 more designing storm-resilient floating platforms for FEMA. Karen, on the other hand, thought a zoning map was a suggestion. This was going to be interesting. Rather than escalate, I simply nodded, turned around, and walked back toward the cabin. She smirked as if she'd won a battle I didn't know we were fighting. But she hadn't seen the drawer in my shed, the one with a laminated blueprint titled Project Duckblind, a rugged-looking remote control with 6 weatherproof buttons, and a yellow note that read, "In case of hurricanes or HOA." She had no idea what was under her feet. That wasn't a dock shack. It was a registered watercraft on hydraulically adjustable pontoons with twin outboard motors, solar-fed batteries, and a GPS anchor override. Built it myself over 5 winters. She had no clue. Back inside, I made a cup of strong coffee and watched her through the drone feed I'd installed 2 years ago for storm season. Karen was spreading out cushions now, setting up some twinkle lights, and placing a large cheese tray on the bench where I used to keep my tackle boxes. The nerve of it all. The raw entitlement. It would have been frustrating if it wasn't so laughable. The HOA had tried its hand at overreach before, trimming my tree without permission, citing me for painting my shutters navy instead of approved slate gray, but this was a new level. This was an incursion. Max curled up by the fire and sighed. I patted his head. "Let her enjoy her kingdom, buddy. Tomorrow we sail." The next morning, I called the sheriff. He was an old fishing partner and knew my property line better than most surveyors. When he arrived and saw Karen barricaded inside my boathouse with a folding table and a Bluetooth speaker blasting smooth jazz, he almost choked on his thermos coffee. Karen marched out like a soldier on parade and demanded to know why law enforcement was intimidating an HOA officer conducting community enhancement duties. I'll give her this. Her confidence was bulletproof. She even handed him a copy of the HOA bylaws and pointed to a highlighted section about public access to shared amenities. The sheriff gave it a glance and said, "Ma'am, this isn't shared. It's registered to Jack, not the HOA. Always has been." Karen scoffed, dug in deeper, and accused both of us of gender bias and harassment, claiming she felt unsafe and victimized. She then filmed us with her phone while narrating for a future lawsuit, or maybe just Facebook. The sheriff looked at me, shrugged helplessly, and whispered, "I can't drag her out unless you file a civil claim. She's claiming temporary visitation. Ain't worth the mess." I nodded. I understood. Karen knew how to play the legal ambiguity game. Long enough to cause chaos but not quite enough to get cuffed. She had just enough plausible deniability and too much HOA power for anyone to step in directly. At least for now. As we walked back to the cabin, I asked the sheriff to keep this under wrap. He chuckled and said, "Knowing you, Jack, she's about to have the weirdest week of her life." I didn't say much. I didn't need to. My plan was already ticking into motion. Back inside, I pulled out the remote, connected it to the Boathouse systems, and ran a diagnostics check. All systems green. I opened the control app and confirmed the flotation lock had disengaged. Karen may have thought she'd conquered a piece of lakeside paradise, but what she'd really done was move into a stealth ship. I watched her through the drone one more time. She was lying in a hammock she had installed using 2 of my storage posts, sipping wine and reading a book called Assertive Boundaries, Taking Space in a Male World. The irony could have knocked over a moose. By sundown, she'd set up tiki torches and pasted fake ivy around the railing. She even hung a speaker from the roof beam and was playing spa music while she practiced yoga. It was now officially a circus. And the best part? She still hadn't noticed the slight drift. A few inches per hour. Slow enough to ignore. But by dawn, she'd be in for a sunrise surprise. Max sat by my side as I programmed the first route waypoint on the map. "She thinks it's hers now," I said quietly. "But she doesn't know the ground's about to leave her." By morning, the lake was still except for the soft lap of water beneath the dock, and the distant hum of a lawn mower across the cove. Karen had apparently settled in, because when I stepped outside with my coffee and looked across to the boathouse, I saw her watering potted plants. Yes, actual potted plants, that she must have brought over in the back of her SUV. One of them was perched on the railing in a pink flamingo-themed pot that matched her robe. It was surreal. She was waving at passing kayakers like she was queen of a houseboat community. I'd seen enough wild things in my life. Tornadoes, rogue waves, even a bear once using my trash bins like a buffet, but Karen declaring herself empress of a stolen boathouse was right up there. I leaned back in my chair and sipped my coffee, letting the scene sink in. She really had no clue what was under her. Later that afternoon, I went into town to grab a few essentials. A new drone battery, some fishing line, and a stack of caramel donuts from Big Eddie's. While I was waiting in line at the hardware store, I overheard 2 guys talking about the floating yoga lady. My ears perked up. Turns out Karen had been live streaming from the boathouse under a fake brand called Lake Light Wellness, offering online relaxation sessions to her HOA friends. The video had apparently gotten a few dozen shares. One of the guys said, laughing, "Didn't even know someone lived in that boathouse." I didn't correct them. Let her dig deeper. When I got home, there were flyers stuck into my mailbox, into my porch railing, even slid under my cabin door. The HOA emblem was at the top in all its smug glory. "Exciting news," the headline read. "The community boathouse is now open for scheduled member retreats." I nearly choked on a bite of donut. Scheduled retreat. She had even included a link to a sign-up form with tiered membership options: Gold, Silver, and Founders Circle. Max walked over with one of the flyers in his mouth like a trophy. I took it and said, "Well, buddy, she's not backing down." But that's the thing about people like Karen. They push until they're suddenly over the edge, and by then, it's too late to swim back. The next day I saw her speaking with a few HOA board members down by the lake. I watched from a distance, through the binoculars I kept from my Coast Guard days. She was animated, arms flying, pointing dramatically toward the boathouse as if unveiling a monument. One of the men looked unsure. Another woman crossed her arms. It was clear not everyone was buying what Karen was selling. She must have sensed the hesitation too, because moments later she invited them aboard. I adjusted the drone for a better angle and watched as 3 people carefully stepped onto my floating platform. Karen guided them around like a real estate agent. I saw her open one of my tackle drawers and pull out a yoga mat, laying it down like it was part of the decor. One man tripped over my marine battery case and nearly fell in. I smiled. Later that evening, I got a knock on my door. It was Sheriff Holden again, hat in hand, expression somewhere between amused and exhausted. "Jack," he said, "we've got a situation brewing." He stepped inside and explained that Karen had submitted a request to designate my boathouse as a shared amenity under the HOA charter. Of course, it wasn't legally viable, but she had filed it through enough back channels to make it a bureaucratic nightmare. The problem was, she was now accusing me of threatening behavior, and claimed I was attempting to intimidate her out of communal space. Holden raised his eyebrows at that part. "She actually said you hovered menacingly near her tomatoes." I couldn't help but laugh. "Tomatoes? Those are my lantern chargers. They're shaped like garden lights." He chuckled but admitted, "Still, I've got to file a report, even if it's just for protocol. Paper trail and all." We sat on the porch for a while, watching the lake. Karen had strung up a neon "Namaste" sign on the front of the boathouse now. It flickered pink against the darkening sky like a broken motel sign. Holden finally said, "Look, I know this is insane, but unless you go through legal channels, she's gonna keep playing her cards. You're outnumbered by red tape." I nodded slowly, sipping from my thermos. "I won't need legal channels," I said. "Just clear skies and enough battery power." The next morning, the air was crisp and unusually quiet. Karen had begun filming another video, I assumed. I noticed her standing on the roof of the boathouse with a wind chime in hand, hanging it from the overhang like she was designing a spa catalog cover. Then she took out a Bluetooth speaker and started blasting ambient flute music across the water. It echoed so oddly that even the birds flew off. I waited until she went back inside, then clicked open the remote controls case. It had been years since I last used it, but my fingers still remembered the weight. I flicked on the power switch. The lights blinked blue. I tested the rudder servos, silent and smooth. I tested propulsion. The motors whirred faintly beneath the lake's surface, just enough to confirm they were alive. Then I shut it down. I wouldn't move it yet. Not until everything was perfect. That evening, I saw something that nearly made me lose it. Karen had brought over a banner that said "Property of Lakeside HOA." She duct-taped it across the boathouse door and posted a new video thanking Jack, the previous owner, for donating the structure to the betterment of our shared community. My jaw dropped. Donated? I hadn't donated anything but my patience, and even that was drying up fast. She was rewriting history in real time. Comments on her video included phrases like, "Wow, what a generous gesture," and finally, "HOA doing something right." My phone buzzed with texts from friends around town. "Did you really give it to them?" one message read. I didn't reply. I just walked to the shed and started prepping the anchor override. Before nightfall, I took Max out for a walk along the ridge, overlooking the lake from behind a row of pines. The boathouse sat glowing like a cartoon spa resort, all solar string lights and floating lanterns. Karen was dancing to music barefoot on the deck. I let out a slow breath. "She's made herself at home," I said. Max barked once. The moonlight glinted off the surface of the water, and somewhere deep in the old military part of my brain, a switch flipped. This wasn't just petty anymore. She'd taken my creation, twisted it into her personal PR stunt, and branded it as hers. It was theft by arrogance. And I knew exactly how to get it back.